What's going on, y'all? Wanted to discuss another book that I think, or a book series that isn't getting the attention it deserves. I'm talking about the Inheritance Cycle books by Christopher Paolini. I remember hearing a great deal about these books when I was growing up, and I never really had the chance to dive into them until I was already out of high school. But I remember always hearing good things about them, and the main thing was that people could not believe they were written by such a young lad. And I recently had the chance to reread these books, and they are so much better than I remembered. To explain my experience with them, so I remember reading the first book. I finished, well, in truth, I was listening to it, and I finished it in maybe a day or two. I was just blown away by the pacing and speed of the book. Following Aragon's journey. Obviously, looking back, many people note that it is very reminiscent of Star Wars A New Hope. But as to be understood, if we look into any story, we're wired for storytelling, and similar stories and the same story gets retold and retold and retold. It's impossible to tell a story that hasn't been told before in some context or in some form. But what we can do as writers, and I'm not one, I apologize, but you can create a world that hasn't been experienced before, and that's what really makes something stand out. And wow, the first book was incredible. The action was great. Aragon's journey was incredible. Brahm's sacrifice was noble and heart-wrenching. There was even a magic system of sorts, which at the time this book came out was very rare, very rare. I remember reading that book, and in the final battle, when they kill the Shade, I got goosebumps listening to that. It was incredible. So I quickly dived into the next book, and the subsequent books, and the second book especially, when I first experienced it, felt so boring and so slow. It was just endless training that continued on and on and on. And I think I was at a time in life where I was not appreciative of the little moments and the more simpler focus. I think that Eldest also has a lot of good things to teach us about mental resilience and not crippling ourselves by trying to think and embrace challenges. Aragon is going through so much pain with a scar or an injury he sustained in the final battle of the first book, and that plagues him throughout the second book a lot. And as a person myself that I've gone through different physical and emotional challenges, at the time I first read that book, I hadn't been confronted by a lot of challenges. And I kind of thought, oh gosh, can't he just pick himself up and can't we get to the good stuff? And I've read the rest of the books, and though they were good, and I do still think that the final confrontation with Galbatorix is a little anticlimactic. I just thought to myself, well, the first book blows them all out of the water. But then recently, I re-listened to these books, and I think it's because I've dealt with a lot more difficult things of late and been challenged a lot more. I've really found a lot of solace in these books and their teachings. And I really came to a realization that all of these books, even the second one, are so much better than I remembered. And while I still do feel that the first book is the best one, it's not leaps and bounds better than the others. The others are actually still very good and on par. And as I mentioned previously, the way you can really know if these books are good and if they have that incredible capability, it all relates back to how rereadable they are. And once you know the twists and the direction that these books are going, they're great. Once you know the truth about who Aragon's father really is, and that it's Brom, that makes the first book, which is already the best book, so much better. Oh, my goodness, just it adds so much more to everything. And it even further strengthens Brom's sacrifice. And much like the twist within Game of Thrones that sadly went absolutely nowhere with Jon Snow being the true heir, when you know that, it makes you respect Ned Stark all the more. The twist with Brom is it makes you respect him all the more. And it actually goes somewhere. Unlike Game of Thrones.
You're not going to die. Get us some water.
Oh, no water, just
Is there a mace there?
Listen to me, Ned. If Robert finds out, you'll kill him. You know he will. You have to protect him. Promise me, Ned. Promise me. Promise me, Ned. Promise me.
When you know who Aragon's real father is, and he goes through that whole dynamic where he thinks that Galbatorix is his father, and you see that anguish and confusion, it really just adds light to that. There's times in life where we ourselves might not understand something as it really is, and we go through this whole process where we might overthink and be left feeling lost and confused, when in truth it's simpler than we thought. And it just takes patience and time for us to find that. Also, who the heck would have expected that Roran would become such an awesome character? He was just an afterthought in the first book, and then the second book comes along, and holy cow, you could genuinely argue he might be a more interesting character than Aragon. It was just very unorthodox and very unexpected for that beat for that style of book. It would be almost as if Luke Skywalker had some cousin that survived the stormtroopers killing the parents, and then he went on to become a Jedi too. Very, very different, very creative, and so riveting. While I still hold to my thought that the fourth book is a tiny bit disappointing, it kind of seems to wrap itself up a little too nicely with the discovery of additional dragon eggs and the confrontation with Galbatorix. And then the other thing is that then they finally win, and I think the book goes on for about 100 pages longer than it needs to, where they're just trying to resolve things that already are resolved. They won. Despite these flaws, these books are much better than people give them credit for. And given Paolini's age at the time of writing, they are a monumental achievement. Reread them. I implore you to do so.